Alright, now let's actually set up that email service so that every instance of the email service class has the functionality to send actual emails, or at least send them correctly, So first we'll go into our email.test file and we'll add a little bit of what we have here. We'll make sure we initialize the email test service properly, or an instance of the email service properly, just like so. Perfect. So now we have an actual email service which has the isActive and API key flag set up, and we'll use this and say, hey, it should have these properties when set up, and they should be truthy. So we should probably add some stuff there that, hey, that these are truthy or falsy depending on what we want. And so let's actually create a test to do just that. Let's test that the instance, let's say, is inactive or whatever when testing, just so we know that, hey, when we're actually testing this, we do not want emails to be active. So we'll say expect email service, or let's say .isActive to be falsy, just like that. And let's also just for the sake of it, let's expect the transport property to be truthy, just so that we know that it does exist, but it is not actively sending out emails. And just for good measure, let's run npm test email.test.js. Cool, looks good, which means, hey, whenever we are in test mode, even though we know that our configuration has isActive set up to be true, whenever we're testing, this should be false. And that's good. It just means we're not sending emails when we're testing. Now, sending emails is going to be a little different. We should probably test for that. We should say, hey, I want to be able to describe testing of method, let's call this method send email. And we're going to describe that because we want to be sure that we can send emails. And let's create two tests for this. Let's call the first one returns 202 status code when all goes well. And then we will give it an async meth callback function here, and we will create a new email. Now this email object is going to have a few things in there. We want to know who we're sending it to, which in this case will just be me@you.them, and we want to know who we're sending it from, and let's just say it's info, or let's just use the same one that I was using before, rate.my.setup.app@gmail.com. So I'm just going to use exactly the sender address that I used for SendGrid. And then I'm going to say subject is test subject email sending thingy, or whatever you want to put here. And the HTML, which represents the actual content in the email, will be an H1 that says test email, just like that. Now this is going to be the email object that is to determine how we actually send it, and then we're going to expect to be able to pass that to the email service .send email function or method. And we're going to pass it that email configuration, and we're going to expect that res to send us back an object that has the status of the email, which should be 200. Should have the email that we sent, or the email object that we sent out, and it should have no error attached to it. So we'll just say something like error null, just like this. And let's create one more test, but this test will be a little different. Instead of returning a 202, we'll say return 400 status code when something goes wrong. And so in this case, well, let's just say we accidentally misconfigured this email and we sent an empty one, and then we send the email. We should expect this to be something like, 400, and should still give us back the email, but the error should be, let's say it's an array of errors because it's probably missing a bunch of things. But let's just say message missing to field, since maybe there's only one for the time being. It's just that, like, hey, if this is missing the to field here, like it doesn't know who to send it to, it should definitely throw us an error. And so let's just expect that to be true. And then we will end that object there and save this. And so we're now testing just this new send email method that should either return a 202 status code with a valid email credentials and a 400 status code when things are not right. And so to get those tests passing, let's head into our email.js file and let's update this email service with an async send email method that accepts an email object And we'll just say something along the lines of, let's just try const res equals await this dot transport dot, what is it, send mail. There you go. And this just sends an email using the pre-selected transport object. And it has some mail options, which have a bunch of stuff in there. We're just going to say send mail. And send mail takes some mail options, which in this case, we'll just pass it the email object that we established in our test before. And by the way, we'll catch any errors, and we'll handle those in a second. And then we'll just say const status equals, and the interesting thing about this is it returns an array, and that array, the first item in that array should be the one we're looking for, should be the response we're looking for, and so it should have a status code. And if that status code is equal to 202, let's return an object with the status code, the email, and error set to null. Otherwise, something went wrong, and we'll return the status, the email, and the error will just be equal to res.0, the first item in that array, and we'll just send it the body of whatever went wrong there. Now, if something explicitly went wrong and we need to catch an error, we'll console.error errors with email occurred. And then let's just, let's just stringify that. It's probably a terrible way to do this, but that's fine for the time being. We'll just stringify that error. And then let's say const errors. I think it passes multiple errors. So we'll say error.response.body.errors. And let's just return those instead. Status 400, email, error, and it'll be the errors if they exist, or just an array that has the error in it. Now, you'll notice here, by the way, this is actually sending emails at all times, even if it's testing at the moment. We're not even using this isActive flag, which we want to use, because in the condition that we're testing, we don't actually want to send emails. We want to just simulate that an email sent when the service is not active. Otherwise, we want to actually call this send mail method on the transport object created with the node mailer and node mailer SendGrid libraries, using the email object passed in. But in the case that it's not active, we'll say if not, this dot is active. And if, let's just say, email.to does not exist, or if it's falsy, we'll say the status will be 400, email, and we'll just create a fake error here, which will just be, or we'll simulate at least. The field will be 2, and the message will be missing 2 field, just like that. Otherwise, we will just console.log to notify sending fake email to, and we'll say email.to from email.from. And then we will return a status of 202, the email, and error is null. So we're just, again, simulating just the process of sending an email here. And that should be fine. In that case, let's run this. Okay, looks like it failed. That's cool. Let's see why. Missing 2 field. I just did not do that correctly in the test, huh? I created one here that said field 2, missing 2 field, and in this case I just expected to have a message that said missing 2 field. Something along those lines, right? Oh, also need a period here. Ta-da! Let's also add a field there. Field 2. Perfect. Now let's run this again. Okay, good, that looks good. And again, I probably should have run these tests before I implemented that method to make sure that these tests are failing without it. And see that they are. 2 tests failed. This one and that one. Cool. Both of the ones that I wanted to fail. When I bring this back, when I actually implement the send email method, hopefully they're working. And they are. So again, we're really doing 2 things here. When constructing emails, we pass in a few options, which we saw here are the to, the from, the subject, and the HTML options, or at least the configuration we have when passing the email object to node mailer's transport object here. And then it sends the mail. We just check the response. If the status code is valid, we return a valid object. And if otherwise, we return whatever we're given. And if anything goes wrong, we return an explicit 400 code with the email and whatever errors happened. And so at that point, we're good to go. Let's commit this. Git status, git add, git commit, implemented, send email method on email service. And let's get ready for the next part.